Chapter 5, Permitting in Protected Areas. To begin with, it's actually quite a complex process. We have on the one side legislation that deals with protection of the environment. On the other hand, we have extraction of raw materials. And often the protected areas coincide with sites of the raw materials. In general, if we look at the mining side, there are at least 2 mining permits necessary. This all depends on the member state legislation and can vary from member state to member state. As a first step, the mining company need to apply for an exploration license. If the mineral is not a concession mineral, an agreement with the landowner is necessary. So it's either an agreement or an exploration license. Once the company knows enough that this resource contains enough of valuable materials, it will apply for a mining license. This is not necessary when the landowner owns the minerals. It's not a so-called concession mineral. Most minerals that are concession minerals, there are metals and a few industrial minerals. Next, depending upon the member state, of course, a minimum is an environmental permit, so-called environmental impact assessment that must be made, that covers a wide range of needs that the company need to show. It goes from health and safety to how to best manage the operation in terms of environmental protection, to closure of mine and after use. Land use rights are often given through other permits, but they may be necessary or are part of the permitting process. So land use is always a necessary part. So initially, we have here what we see here on the right, assessment based upon geology and exploration permit, land use throughout the process. We have a resource estimation, we have a mining license, we have an environmental impact assessment, land use throughout, and there may be additional permits that are necessary, including that the land use is actually fixed at the end. So, in many cases of extraction of raw materials, they will not be permitted when mining infringe upon the protected nature. There are, though, recommendations for solutions of mining in and near areas of protected nature. Otherwise, we have no EU-produced raw materials from domestic mining. To think about for the reader, what is the impact upon Natura 2000? The impact depends on the Natura 2000 area. So there is no fixed distance and how the impact will work. It depends on what is protected. So it can be possible to mine very near, or one may need to mine very far away, depending on the object itself. EU recommendations regarding good practice and mitigation and compensation are existing in the document guidance document on non-energy mineral extraction Natura 2000, and it's not against EU law to observe. Many people think so, but it is not. There are ways that it might be possible, and it can include compensation of infringement also. So a remediation plan is also part of the EIA permitting. It includes safety of the environment around the mine. It's not only about protected nature, it's about the environment around the mine. So no toxic substances above given limits are allowed to be released to the surroundings. And these limits are rigorous and should not be confused with activity of mining. So 100 years ago, the pollution was much more severe than today. So today, pollution is not acceptable. Drilling is what we see here is a part of a exploration of a mining waste site where drilling is being performed, and it's any kind of resource estimation drilling is necessary, and this is because industry standards, industry instruments demands this. Otherwise, the resource of the mineral deposit cannot be adequately assessed. This is industry standards and it are not allowed to be removed. The permitting then, we mentioned in other parts, there are two possibilities to be permitted, either through the minerals that are state controlled or state owned, and they're often referred to as concession minerals. And they contain most metals and critical raw materials and some industrial minerals. And then the other pathway is through those that are controlled and owned by the landowner, and that's usually industrial minerals and aggregates. So there is no exploration license there. There is no mining license, but there must be an agreement with the landowner of access, or that company buys the land from the landowner. But they both need an EIA. And there might be specific difference between different member states or even between the federal states in parts of Europe here. So legislation. There is quite a lot of legislation to be covered when we are dealing with these matters. And in addition to the protection of the nature, like we have the EIA directive, we have the birds directive, the habitats directive, the Natura 2000, water framework directive, extractive waste directive, heritage areas, and there are also local and national legislation that are not EU-wide that also must be taken care of. In addition, health and safety, all of these things are usually put into the EIA assessment, but there are also permits outside. The land use is also part of permission for mining. So what are we gonna do now? This piece of rock here, it contains actually two minerals. One is magnetite, which is used for in Sweden. It's currently the most common iron ore mineral. But together with it, in the north, in the Martainen, which we see here on the map, there is apatite. In this apatite, there is rare earth elements, both in the apatite and also with rare earth specific minerals. So this stuff here, this is really important stuff for us to, if we want to be self-sufficient from rare earth element perspective, which is actually today extremely important because currently we are 100% depending upon import of rare earth elements from the rest of the globe, particularly from China, which dominates the world market here. So we're looking at 4 different sites here. We have Martainen, which is iron ore mining. We have Liikavaara, which is a part now of the Aitik operation, which is copper and molybdenum. We have copper, zinc, lead, gold, silver sulfide advanced exploration project in Stekenjokk, and we have a small gold mining operation in Vinnugransele. Why do we have this wide range of different cases? It is because they have some commonalities in terms of how do we deal with getting permission when we are in or near protected nature and watersheds. If you look at the Martinen case, there it's an iron ore apatite mine. All permits are granted. It was started, but is currently on hold because it was a little bit, it was for a while too expensive to extract compared to the price of the iron ore. So that's one thing that that mining companies has to deal with, is that the prices may fluctuate, and that causes a risk for them when they start the mining operation. So one cannot assume that the profit they have when the prices are high for the raw materials will be sustained throughout the operation. So therefore, they usually count on profitability or the cost of 2/3 of the raw materials, the price, in order to minimize the risk of the operation. Specifics here for this case is that they had compensation measures for infringement on sensitive nature. So in this case, they protected woodlands in the vicinity with similar value on those that were nearby the mining operation. It was also necessary to model impact on water, that there was no pollution coming from the mine into the Natura 2000 river system. And this is done that the company need to make measurements of the content of different contaminants, but also to model this to see that both the model and the analysis results fit together to show that it's not contaminating the area. So it's as we said, there is a compensation of more than 1,220 hectares of the 720 hectares that it was actually using. So that was a necessity to get the environmental permit. Now going to the Liikavaara case, which is a porphyry copper deposit. And it's this mining operation, which is part of the Aitik, which is in the area one of the largest copper mines in Europe, and as such, quite important for European consumption of copper, and thus necessary in the green transition. Here it was the key aspect was to model and design the mining area to prohibit release of toxic substances. And what toxic substances were there here? There is sulfur in the mine, and therefore the water that has been used in the mine, it has to be recirculated until the acidity of the water and the heavy metals that potentially are there are down to acceptable levels, which are usually very, very low. So they are on the levels of what is in the surrounding nature. So then when it's been released, this water, it has to be monitored, it has to be analyzed to see how it moves and it spreads from the area, and also to see that it's not contaminating the Natura 2000 river system nearby. So that is part of the permitting, similar to the Martinen case. And then the included in the model and in the mining design is the storage of the waste rock, so that it will be safe site with no acid leakage. Then going to the Stekenjokk case, which is an exploration project. It's advanced, but it turned out that they needed an environmental permit for the mining license because of the Natura 2000 areas that it was infringing upon. And this was in order to minimize the impact on sensitive nature and reindeer husbandry. So therefore, the company suggested to mine during the frozen period of the year. That all of the mining is to be done underground, and the processing, in order to minimize impact, to be done just across the Swedish-Norwegian border, which are just a few kilometers away, in Jomma in Norway. And similarly here is that the impact on the water bodies must be shown that they are within acceptable limits. Then we go to the gold mine project, which is a small gold mine nearby to a Natura 2000 river system here also. And here the permit builds similarly here upon field data of the water transport, that the modeling of the potentially harmful substances are not impacting the Natura 2000, and also that the construction of the mining site is built such that it minimizes the impact of substances outside of the mining area. Important aspect in this case, as in all other cases, is that the mining companies need to have an early stakeholder connection throughout the permitting process. So with this, we will leave you to a quiz, and there is some suggested reading here and also vocabulary. So thank you very much for listening to this lecture.